Hello everyone, it's another day in the clown decade. Things are going to get worse before they get better, you know how all this goes. It's another reacting to Politics Joe Vox Pops. They titled this one asking Conservatives at Jordan Peterson's rally how to save the West. Obviously it's about the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship conference. And to be fair, I would love to know what they have to say. So let's get into it.
To describe this conference as sort of like conservative in some sort of simple way is actually missing the mark.
I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that Politics Joe front-loaded this clip to try and say, oh, it's beyond conservatism, it's actually fascism. Whereas in reality, it's actually true. There's libertarians there, conservatives, classical liberals, if you will, some people who are quite firmly on the left. The whole point is to have an overarching agreement on what our society should look like and try and go there, and then it's a question of, well, how much centralised control of the economy is there and how much isn't there. For now, though, we all agree that the culture's been absolutely ruined.
We definitely have parties in Germany who would like to push large-scale censorship campaigns. So I think there's definitely a threat which conservatism should oppose.
At least they put the free speech Germans second.
The demographic cliff. That's a particular area of interest of mine. Young people are not having children.
Yeah, over on the Wust Club, me and a panel put forward our opinions on the birth rate question, and overall we don't think it's that big a deal because it's just natural reaction to effectively having overpopulation on Britain, which has largely only occurred in the past 20 years due to, well, not the birth rate, I'll say. But when it comes to demographics, yes, people are clearly bringing that into the immigration debate because, yes, it's, say, change London and not necessarily for the better.
With Nigel Farage, I think, when I look at him, I think, is he a good leader? I suppose I look at him as a Tory with a different ribbon, really.
That's Sammy Woodhouse. Yeah, I'm just at a point where if people are calling Farage a reform, just Tory with a different coloured rosette, I just ignore them at this point, which is a shame because Sammy Woodhouse is usually alright.
Some of the world's most renowned right-wingers have descended on East London for the ARC conference.
Oh, they've got a new guy doing these Vox Pops now, that's interesting. It's an actual Irish guy as well, which makes a lot more sense because Politics Joe is actually an Irish media conglomerate. And as I keep saying, it is effectively the place that apprentice new media elite go to get their experience. And it makes them insufferable. Anyway, go on, describe what's going on here.
The Alliance for Responsible Citizenship is a conference led by Jordan Peterson, psychologist and thought leader on the right that believes in dragons.
If Predator is real, in what way isn't Dragon real?
Well, that was a good introduction until you had to have the jab of, oh, he believes dragons are real. And it's getting very tiring having to explain over and over again, yes, he doesn't mean dragons are literally real in reality, however, they are real in so much as you believe the metaphor to be real. It's just a bit like saying, oh, he believes you can kill two birds with one stone. It's just pointless having conversations with these people. They're just bad faith from the start.
Peterson opened the show on Monday with a 15-minute word soup.
The dominance of the personality by local, narrow, and self-serving whim is not a playable or noble game.
I mean, frankly, I'm not taking this from Politics Joe. Every time I react to their videos, I am constantly cutting out pauses, so let's be real here. Secondly, once again, yeah, that was a fine sentence. It's not my fault or his fault that you can't be bothered to understand what he's saying, because as much as people say Jordan Peterson's fallen off, I don't particularly think he has. I don't think he's as good as he was, but he's still very much a worthy voice for the right. And if you don't want to understand that all he said there is being entirely self-interested to the point of being selfish, does not make you a good person and will make you be seen as unfit for society, I don't know what to do. That wasn't a word soup. He was just being more precise with his words than any of us usually are. That's kind of his whole thing.
Followed up by Kemi Badenoch, who pretended she hasn't been in government for nearly all of her political career.
Yeah, well, Kemi Badenoch's an idiot and currently killing the Tories, so they're right there.
Nigel Farage was one of the big-ticket events, spending his Tuesday afternoon looking bewildered while Jordan Peterson talked at him.
It is one of the unfortunate things with Jordan Peterson, I am kind of on board with Politics Joe here. Because he thinks so deeply about each sentence he's going to say, you do need quite a lot of patience to actually have a conversation with him. And yeah, it can be given away that this is quite uncomfortable when you're more of a fast talker. and a rapid conversationist like Nigel Farage, but, you know, I watched that conversation and I thought it was pretty good.
I'm stood out in the cold instead of dropping £150 on the live stream to speak to some of the attendees.
I'm pleased to be here because we're here to find ways of restoring the Western civilization that has been long lost.
Yes, very based. You got to bear in mind with the art conference, it's not. It is a kind of international movement rather than a national movement. It's an international movement that is pushing for a type of nationalism, which might sound contradictory, but at the end of the day, all they're saying is, listen, we understand that these countries are divided by, you know, some of their unique aspects, and it's absolutely pointless to try and change them to be one world superpower, so let's not bother. That's effectively how it goes down. However, obviously, this gentleman, from the sounds of it, was from Africa, and would probably like that type of Western civilization for his home country, or to move to a country and integrate effectively. That's what this guy sounds like, and I can respect that.
How has Western civilization been lost?
There's this value, you know, that our forefathers or the founders of the Western civilization had. The family values are held tightly together and ensure that things, you know, people don't lose out on what is actually very, very necessary.
It's quite vague with which forefathers he means, but there was definitely a push to have a cohesive family unit, which frankly seems to be pushed from Christianity. Obviously, the two become one flesh, go forth and multiply. It's even in the Ten Commandments, honour your father and mother. Having a family as the tightly knitted, cohesive and stable unit seems to, yes, be the best thing for civilization. I clipped it out, but this guy has said that he did a lot of reading of philosophy and history, which, again, I do really appreciate, and it's not exactly something that was directly talked about an awful lot in my reading of philosophy and history. It was just kind of the assumed value, and I think that's what he's saying. This value was just assumed to be good, and now that largely seems to have been gone, what with the amount of single mothers going up, divorce rates going up, people getting married later than they used to, and people having children later. That is still family values to an extent. Well, some of those later ones, single motherhood obviously isn't. And clearly this guy wants us to get back to a point where actually monogamy is a good thing, and perhaps divorce shouldn't be as easy as we've made it. I'm assuming positions here, but that's my reading of it, and I would agree with him.
And those are, one, to me, faith in God, friends and family, you know, finance, and several other things.
I mean, yeah, this is part of the point of the art conference. It's definitely got a, well, I'm sure they would say, Judeo-Christian core, which, to be fair, both do share a fair amount of values. And yes, care for community, nation, family, and obviously the right to pursue a state. These are very Lockean values, at least if you read the two treatises of government. So this guy seems to know his stuff, which is pretty impressive, and I'm glad they front-loaded this particular guy. Basically because it just doesn't sound mental like you do risk at art conferences and right-wing conferences sometimes, so good start, I'd say.
But in modern times, we can say that the case is different.
I have literally no idea what he means there, but the rest of it was good.
There's many big ideas being discussed here on energy, on the environment, on the future of humanity in terms of the demographic cliff. That's a particular area of interest of mine.
Well, this guy sounds South African. I think I can understand why it is of special interest to you.
Because there's a lot of evidence in many, many countries now that young people are not having children, and that has enormous consequences for the future of many countries.
Well, it's entirely dependent if you think GDP is the be-all and end-all, and I'm coming round to not particularly caring about it. I still talk about GDP per capita just because it's a really easy snapshot of, you know, GDP per capita go up. Generally, that's in line with other statistics such as real-term wages, household disposable income, purchasing power. It tends to correlate somewhat with them. Not perfectly, obviously. It's better just to use those statistics, but nobody knows what those statistics are, so stick to GDP per capita for the normies. But as I was saying, if you just replace the lack of workers you're going to have in 18 years when you don't have kids with automation. Largely, you're going to have, well, the same, if not better, living standards. There's an awful lot of jobs that we still do that can obviously be automated. They've just not been forced to be automated because, well, there's been an awful lot of immigration and that has suppressed wages, especially of these jobs that could be automated and are typically minimum wage. Anyway, the next guy's asked what makes the ARC conference unique compared to other right-wing conferences.
For me, I say that the most noticeable difference is the emphasis on Christianity here. I'm really surprised about how much that features in the talks and also among the delegates or the participants of the conference. That was actually unexpected.
He doesn't say whether he thinks it's a good thing or not, but personally, I think it's a very good thing. I'm genuinely seeing a bit of revival of Christianity in, well, the church I go to. I'm noticing there are more people my age than there were. When I first moved to Wales, nearly 2 years ago now, I started going to church, and frankly, I brought the average age down by about 40 years or something. And that was the case for about a year. What I think's happened is that on the odd fair weather Easter or Christmas masses, other people I think are seeing effectively me go, and it's encouraging them to say, oh, I'm seeing a bit of a revival as well, and it makes them want to go more. And I've noticed since I've started noticing more young people going to church, it's making me want to go more, just to be seen. I don't even necessarily talk to people, but almost as a kind of larp, which all faith starts as a larp. That's kind of what I've realised here. And clearly there is an effort for people to start believing again, at least in some small cohort. This is definitely not a mass societal thing, but it's probably on the rise, which is all we need. So it is good that the ARC conference is also putting an emphasis on religion and Christianity specifically.
One thing I think that is encouraging is how diverse this conference is in terms of people from different backgrounds, and even on the political spectrum.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, it's an international conference, so I'm not shocked that there's a lot of people from a lot of different countries there. And from the looks of it, you know, we've had people obviously from Britain, we've had people from South Africa, we've had people from America obviously as well, and of course the African gentleman from the first interview. It is good to see, because it shows that there is an international interest in actually, well, pushing for a type of nationalism and frankly right-wing society. I kind of hate calling it that, because it should just be termed normal society or civil society, but the left have been so interested in breaking that down that you kind of have to call it right-wing, because the left seems to be fully on board with breaking society down, which is pretty nuts.
I mean, I would say to describe this conference as sort of like conservative in some sort of simple way is actually missing the mark. I mean, there's a lot of people, I think, if you slap the label conservative on them, who are here, I don't think they would find that that's a very accurate label to describe them.
Yeah, I mean, Konstantin Kisin, I don't think he ever describes himself as conservative, but he does want a stable society, so he's right-wing in that way. However, he's liberal in an awful lot of others. I mean, Jordan Peterson always used to be quite uncomfortable with being called conservative, but I think he's just leaned into it now, because what is redeeming about the liberal left side of things? I mean, seriously, what is there left? Give it a few years and they'll have to completely reinvent themselves, but it's going to be difficult for them to find anything positive, because everything they've done for the past few decades is, well, frankly, destroyed civil society. Hence the need for a conference where they basically just say, can we be normal now, please? That's what this conference is effectively saying, and there are some people on the left who actually want that. Anyway, this, I am assuming Priest, is asked how he would describe the event.
One dimension is that it has to do with a sort of dissatisfaction with, you could say, people, elites or people in power, or the current sort of order, the way things are, and people dissatisfied with that and wanting to sort of do something different, to imagine something new and different. I mean, whatever conservatism this is, it's not the conservatism of the past.
Yeah, I'd certainly argue that that's definitely true. I imagine when he says the past, he means kind of the last 30 years, where effectively the left just kept winning throughout the 20th century, and so eventually they tried to reinvent themselves as, well, emulation of the left, just not crazy with your tax money. Obviously it's got to a point where they are just the left now. Even normies are saying that when it comes to, say, the Tory party, or when it comes to the Republicans before Trump got in. And so, yeah, it's kind of a discussion on, well, Yeah, but as I say, just how do we make a normal society again, and we will open it up to ideas from the left, because we won't necessarily have all the good ideas. And this was the whole point of diversity of thought, and yeah, that's what this guy said. And this is the thing with the left. A lot of them are coming over because they're effectively waiting for the left to reinvent themselves into something not crazy again. And you'll probably see that, well, you're seeing the process of that now, actually, with Ash Sarkar doing her faux apology tour. The problem you have there is that's obviously fake, so it needs to actually be an authentic reinvention, which the left aren't quite there yet, but they do understand they need to do it, hence Ash Sarkar's faux apology tour.
I think there's a lot of soul searching from the British people that I've spoken to about the previous government. They're finding their way as to what a new Conservative party or a new Conservative alliance is going to offer.
Yeah, this is definitely happening with the amount of people moving over to Reform from the Tory party. I'm literally one of those people. I know plenty of others who are. Most people who aren't moving over either don't think Farage is very good, which is fair enough, or they are so attached to the Tory party and the fact it's a few hundred-year-old institution that they literally can't think of doing anything else. Which honestly kind of bodes well for Nigel Farage, because clearly from the look at the membership numbers, more people think he is useful than they think Kemi Badenoch is useful. And I think, frankly, it's too late for, Robert Jenrick to actually do anything to save the party. So this soul-searching is largely move over to Reform, hang on, let's not throw all the baby out with the bathwater, because, as I say, most of my issues with Reform come in the form of their electoral reforms, such as moving to PR and changing the House of Lords up, which, don't get me wrong, the House of Lords definitely needs a change up, but don't make it a second elected chamber. We're not America. But generally, Reform is trying to turn away from just being a protest vote and being one that's actually saying, right, this is the plan and policies we have for the next 5 years. Please vote for us, we will implement it, rather than just a middle finger to the Tory party and the establishment. And from what I can see within the Tory Reform Party and from the MPs, they are clearly working their socks off to try and become a professional party, which I greatly appreciate, and I think hopefully will show dividends at the next election in 4 years' time.
So, which is a good thing to do. I mean, they've got 4 or 5 years to sort out what they believe in, what they want to do, should they have the privilege and the honour of becoming government again.
Yeah, absolutely. Nothing to disagree with there. It's the thing I don't think I put across well in that video I replied to Sargon on the other day. A lot of his advice has to do with stuff that you would do when there's like a year from election or something like that. It's pretty pointless doing it now because it's hard to keep up that momentum for 4 years. It's much easier to keep that momentum when you're within a year of election. That's pretty much what Labour did, and it worked really well for them. I mean, they've got a massive majority. What do you expect?
A lot of people, I think, feel frustrated for what's going on, and not just in the UK, but there's people from all over the world.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, this is the thing. The problems that Britain has had for the past few decades seems to be the problem that is shared by most of Europe and America, and Canada and Australia as well, possibly. It's no wonder this is an international movement. All these countries have similar issues. Anyway, she's asked for specifics of these frustrations.
I think a little bit of everything, but yeah, I think it's definitely to do with politics. You know, we've got Labour in government at the minute, which seems to be just an absolute nightmare. So I think a lot of people here at the conference are right-wing. They want a right-wing government, and I think that's what we need.
I mean, yeah, true. I'm in the complete same boat, and I know a lot of people that are in this same boat who aren't already left-wing. It has been a difficulty having to tell left-wing people that we have not had a right-wing government for like 20 years, but I think it's slowly seeping through that this is actually the case, given that really people who are politically engaged are realising that Labour really aren't that different to what we've had from the Tories for the past few years, especially when you look at statistics. And Labour are nowhere near left-wing enough for them, so I suppose actually it's not quite working out that they'll go right-wing, but these people wouldn't be happy until we're in a communist country, so I don't know what else to tell them.
I suppose many people would say that the UK in particular has had a right-wing government for the last 14 years.
Yes, well, there's many people are wrong anyway. Anyway, he asks Sammy what people would say to that inside the convention centre.
Well, I'll say my opinion. I think, we've had Tories in for over a decade. I think they've not done a very good job at it. The last election I voted Reform. It's the first time I've voted. I've always been an activist. So I've tried to keep politics out of my work and just focus on the cause. But I think when you get to the stage that we're at in our country, it's very hard to keep out of politics.
Yeah, it was quite funny. I was talking to one of my left-wing friends the other day, and he said this is the first time he's voted as well, and he voted Labour to keep the Tories out. And again, it's what I mean by the difficulty of convincing people that we've actually had a left-wing government for the last 14 years under the Tories, and then ergo, you've basically had 20 full years of left-wing governments. But they just don't believe it because of all the headlines about austerity and things like that. You actually look into all of these statistics, it's all nonsense. And I don't know what it was about the Tories, but they just had horrific people in PR to the point where maybe they were Labour activists in the PR department, making everything worse for them. Some of the mistakes they made, it's probably understandable. Despite all that, it took 14 years to actually get them out, despite the fact that they weren't doing very well, and that's mainly because the other parties were worse.
I think a lot of people have lost hope in the Tories, and I think if the Tories and Reform come together, I don't know if the UK had kind of want that to happen. Just because they've been in power for so long, they've just done a terrible job at it.
I mean, Reform are all saying that they're not going to do it either, and I agree with them. Why would they? Why would they need to? The best thing for Tories to do would be to try and defect, but obviously not all of them are going to be able to defect, because Reform aren't going to let people like Priti Patel in, who was the architect of letting in the most immigrants ever. Again, I had to mention this to my left-wing friend when he said he doesn't like Suella Braverman because she went on about Albanian gangs or something like that, and then he brought up Priti Patel as well, being another racist anti-immigrant, to which I had to point out, well, Priti Patel oversaw the largest influx of immigrants that the country has ever had, so again, how do you square that circle? And there's never an answer to it, and at the end of the day, it's kind of weird that the left-wingers will all say Tory lies, Tory lies, Tory lies, and then only use Tory rhetoric for their evidence that they're right-wing, as if they didn't call them liars for 14 years.
So I think, maybe the Tories the Reform just kind of keep it to Reform. I think some politicians, such as Suella Braverman, I think Kemi, I saw her speech, I thought Kemi did good. I think maybe if they joined Reform, it might work.
Suella, yes, but her and her husband, given that she's a Tory, obviously, and he's part of Reform, they're constantly talking about trying to do some sort of merger, so Suella Braverman could probably move over, absolutely. Kemi Badenoch, no. There's no way. There's too much of a bad taste in everyone's mouths from Kemi Badenoch, as she has been leader so far, so it'd be pointless letting her come over and join anyway. But Reform vet most of the defectors, so I would not be shocked if they properly vet the high-profile defectors, and if one of them's Kemi, I wouldn't be shocked if they just say no. Anyway, we're back to the African gentleman who is asked about J.D. Vance's speech in Europe and about how there is actually an enemy within Europe, and it needs to deal with that before dealing with the enemies without Europe.
International politics would, so when he's talking about enemies within Europe, who I think he's talking about, the politicians that are in Europe that are probably collaborating with the world powers, the big farmers, and the Trump administration has been big on those world organizations and the big farmers that have been eating up the fabrics of the value system of America.
Yeah, again, it's who are the enemies within Europe, Britain, America? Well, it's these internationalists, it's these globalists who will just openly say on interviews that they see international law and international governments as sovereign rather than Westminster, which we need to get rid of. Again, Keir Starmer literally said this. He prefers Davos to Westminster, which is nuts for anyone in Britain to say, but it's what he said, and now he's in charge. And now it's no wonder that international law is the law we have to follow before British law. Hence, we are literally trying to give away the Chagos Islands with more money than Mauritius is actually worth, by the way. We're planning to give Mauritius, I think it was £18 billion last time it was in the news, and they're still trying to push for more. It was in the news today, actually, that Mauritius is going to push for even more money. Because why wouldn't you say no if you know every time you say no you get an extra few million? $1 billion even. It's crazy.
My personal opinion is that he was right. So I think like all of this media outrage was again a bit overplayed. A lot of Germans, I think, also agree with that notion. And actually there came a documentary out from a left-leaning American news station, essentially 60 Minutes, who basically accompanied our police by like raiding citizens' homes for posting memes online, which I think most Germans are not really in agreement with.
Yeah, it was a crazy documentary, that. The 60 Minutes host even asked, I think it was German lawmakers, why they're doing it effectively. I think the answer was basically just, well, they're being offensive, why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't we arrest them? And it was really put into perspective when someone quote tweeted it, I saw it on Twitter, and said, you got to understand the German mindset's just alien to us. For example, my friend was in a German hostel last year, and there was a sign up on the dining room saying breakfast mandatory. Like, this is the German mindset, very scheduled, and if you miss it, effectively you're not civil. And obviously, it's very scheduled in so much as you can't offend anyone else because that would be uncivil, therefore you need to be arrested. Germany just seems crazy to me.
And I think in general, I would totally agree with the notion that the enemy from within is often much more dangerous than the enemy from outside adversaries, because you need competent leadership from within. Otherwise, you are not able to face outside adversaries. And I think this is historically has been proven again and again for everyone who knows like the Roman history, for example.
If you want to hear the story of Carthage, go to the original video, I'd say. But yeah, he's absolutely right. You don't even need historical examples. It's just self-evidently true. If you have competent leaders who have the national interest at heart, then they will be good at dealing with outside threats. However, we have the opposite at the moment. We have incompetent leaders who do not have the national interest at heart. They have international interests at heart. And wouldn't you know, it's making the country worse. Who would have thunk?
What do you think reform could bring to the table that hasn't been brought by the Conservatives?
Well, when I speak to people, there's a lot of concerns around stuff like the gang rapes, around immigration. And I think Tories and Labours have done a bad job at it. So I think when people look at reform, they look at them as it's the last hope, and that, you know, they're going to kind of finally take action on certain things, which I think when we look at those kind of issues, people are scared. You know, it's a conversation that people don't want to have.
Yeah, it's the good thing about reform. They are definitely trying to focus on a lot of the big issues that and big concerns that voters have. Net zero, immigration, the economy, cost of living, and there's even some niche issues that a lot of niche voters would want, such as fishing and farming as well. They're very good on them. And so it's kind of no wonder that they're slowly becoming the most popular party in Britain, albeit by polls, but the only poll that matters in the end is the election. So hopefully that'll improve.
If we look at Rupert Lowe, I think Rupert's doing really well at the moment. He's saying a lot of things that other politicians don't want to talk about. I think with Nigel Farage, I think when I look at him, I think, is he a good leader, or is he just somebody that wants, you know, to kind of fit in, be accepted by media? And I suppose I look at him as a Tory with a different ribbon, really.
I mean, I'll give Sammy some grace. She did say that she doesn't exactly focus on this politics stuff usually with her work, so this might be informing her opinion somewhat. I think it's absolutely... I mean, Rupert Lowe, yes, good. Absolutely agree. Nigel Farage wanting to be part of the media landscape, I don't understand how you can look at Farage's career and ever think that. It's something that I've seen Dominic Cummings say in the past too, and I just don't understand where the idea of that comes from. He has always been standoffish with the media. He has always been on the opposite side to the media narrative. And he actually had the chance to have a large space in his own media ecosystem on GB News. He had his own show, and he's missing it most of the time now because he's actually working as an MP. Why did he do that? Because he was campaigning for reform, and people just kept asking, why don't you go and actually become a politician again? We miss you, effectively. You're really good. You gave us hope. And so he went for it. And I don't see any Tory doing that. I mean, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for example, sure, he might go to be a politician again, but he's happily in his little media ecosystem on GB News as well. And now that he's out of it, he'll probably try and go back into it because he does actually have a sense of service. He's probably not the best example of it. But there are clearly people who just use the Tory party as a stepping stone to other opportunities. Actually, the best example, Rory Stewart. Terrible at everything he does. managed to fail upwards into the most popular podcast in Britain somehow, even though he's an idiot. How did he do that? Oh, he used the Tory party as a stepping stone. Nigel Farage, believe it or not, is not Rory Stewart. Nigel Farage is actually there to change things, but as I say, Sammy Woodhouse, she doesn't really concentrate on this stuff as she says, so I'm not going to be too mad at her, but let's be real, Farage is absolutely not like the rest of them, and anyone who says that, I just have to assume they don't pay attention.
One of those emphases in this conference is people who are concerned with sort of like family, and family and the most intimate relationships of family and local community being the foundation, right? And that's really a problem in our modern society is we have people who are very isolated and alone. We have families that don't work. Most people come from broken families, are not able to maintain lifelong relationships. And that's a concern that I don't think I think that's silly to sort of label that kind of a concern as conservative.
Yeah, absolutely. But unfortunately, the left wing made conditions for that to be the norm. So here we are. Kind of hate to say it, but I know what he means. Like, if you're left wing, obviously you can have a stable family unit, and in fact, quite a lot of left wing families do have a stable family unit because they don't realise that the country is just an extended family, and so they think things that apply to their family don't necessarily apply to the larger country. For example, whenever public spending comes up, obviously the right-wing position is, can we balance the budget please? The left-wing position is, oh, just borrow forever. Well, great, we've been doing that, and we've been stagnant for years now thanks to that. Ironically, if you treated it more as a family budget, we'd probably be doing much better. And there is obviously the difference that you can print money, but obviously that causes inflation down the line. So there is a bit of a difference in the power you have over your own budget, but you still need to effectively realise that if you're going to borrow like that, you do need to pay it back in the future in some way, usually via upping productivity anyway. As I say, I get his point, but ultimately it is the conservative position, as it kind of always has been, because left-wingers are all basically Marxists, whether they realise it or not, and they hated the idea of the family, so it's kind of no wonder we're in this position where liking a family is right-wing.
What was clear is that ARC is not as Britain-centric as NatCon or any of its other iterations, and doesn't necessarily reflect the state of the British right as it stands. But perhaps the conversations on stage this week are a sign of things to come in political discourse here in months and years to come.
Well, I hope so, because I didn't think it was too bad from the speeches I saw. And yeah, well, it's an international conference, so no doubt it wasn't as nationalistic as NatCon or anything like that. And honestly, I think it's way too early for Britain to start bringing, well, religion into its political debates, I would say. Britain ain't ready for that. However, reform and all that, they are definitely going to be focusing on community, family and the economy, which is what a lot of people would like to hear, because everyone feels like they have effectively been economically suppressed, and not only that, with the money that has been nicked off us by the state, it's not being put to good use at all. And Reform are coming in to say we will do that differently, and I think that will make people very happy. Anyway, I think with that, it's everything I had for you for today. So, tonight it is the Peloponnesian Wars epilogue, where we go through Sparta being ruined by Macedonia. Then tomorrow it's Tosh News, where we go through news stories of the week. And then Saturday it's Laughing at the Guardian with some women, and I really need to get some guests for that. Videos out as and when I can make them, of course. If you like this channel, please do subscribe, like, tell me in the comments what you thought of these people in the Vox Pop. That really does help with the algorithm. Or please do give a super thanks in the comments if you think I earned it, or a super chat on the next live stream. Or you could always become a member for £2 a month at the lowest, and that gives you unlimited access to all my old streams, so do have a look at that. With that though, as I said, that's everything I had for you for today, so once again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.